I spend a lot of my time in the whole world of Meta ads, Google ads, that kind of thing, and so I'm based in Dublin, and I work with a lot of UK and Irish charities, and I've been lucky to have worked with some really cool charities as well. My background, very quickly, is in I used to work in agencies, but in the good old days I used to sell advertising, newspaper advertising, radio advertising. Got into agency work, left that, and joined the charity sector. And since then, I've worked for myself. So just before we start, I'd love to get a sense in the room of, maybe you could put in the chat. Can everyone do the chat all right? Maybe just tell me your first name, what charity you're from, and give me a good sense in terms of your Facebook ads. Is your charity, or are you yourself, are you a beginner or an intermediate, that sort of thing? So give me your name, your first name, the name of your charity, and are you a beginner, a total beginner, or an intermediate? Thanks, Susan. Not for fundraising specifically. Great. Hannah, good to meet you. Complete beginner, very good. Very good. Very good. It's all rolling in. Nancy, good to meet you. Jennifer, Wendy. Done little ads in the past. Very good. Very good. Very good. Brilliant. Very good. Camille, ads internally. Okay, brilliant. It's all coming in there. Brilliant. Very good. Excellent. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So I would say, I mean, in Meta ads has changed a lot, and I would quickly say that probably last year, 2025, was some of the biggest changes to Meta ads, and unfortunately for charities, particularly in the EU, we have found it really difficult. And one of the big points I'll share with you is that, this idea of keeping your eggs in one basket, i.e. Facebook, all the time, is probably becoming a thing of the past, and less and less. In particular, reason for that is because of a lot of the Meta ad restrictions that have come into place last year, and indeed started in 2021. If I say Meta ad restrictions, does that ring a bell with anyone? Yeah, you can turn off your mic if you like, and do tell me, or give me a thumbs up. Meta ad restrictions, does that ring a bell for anyone?
Nope.
No. No. Okay, cool. That's good. Okay, so let me start. So I'm going to share my slides with you here very quickly. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, so so a quick timeline. So back in 2021, Apple, the iOS, gave users the option to gave users the options to opt out of tracking, which was a really bad for Facebook advertisers, for people who wanted to target people who used the Apple phones and so forth. So this was the start of something really big in terms of a lot of changes that happened. The CPMs, which is your cost per 1,000 impressions, have doubled in the last 5 years, and there's been a real rise of other social media platforms like TikTok, etc. And so Apple was the first. Apple in many ways started these restrictions, giving ownership back to people in terms of who wants to be tracked, etc. And then in January 2005, we saw things like restricted domains, conversion-based events, audience limitations. We saw a lot of these things coming into play. And then in July of 2025, there was further restrictions, custom audiences or conversions that included sensitive information. And then probably the biggest one in October 2025, which really affected mainly charities in nonprofits in the EU, were that Meta has banned both political advertising, but also social issue ads. So social issue ads included ads about climate change, health, education, refugees, rights, housing. If your charity or nonprofit was about these type of subjects, in October in particular, it became so difficult to advertise on Facebook. And a lot of that had to do that with restrictions that were coming in from the EU. And of course, Facebook fell in line and implemented a lot of those restrictions. So those affected now with a lot of these restrictions are mainly charities that are in the health space or the wellness space, EU-based charities, like I said, and charities often seen their ad account flagged as flagged for review. So okay, can everyone see me there now? Yeah. So what I want to say right from the start is, since 2021, right up until 2025, many charities in the EU saw a lot of restrictions come into place for their meta advertising. And the problem now is for many of the UK charities is they're now, one of their biggest concerns is that these restrictions will more than likely come into effect for UK charities. Now, it hasn't happened yet, but I know of charities, for example, who are very much, deal with people with certain sicknesses like cancer and so forth. And they're now finding it very difficult to advertise on Facebook. And so one of the big red flags for many charities in the UK is that, will it be affecting UK charities? And yet we don't know yet. But it's certainly something that when I talk to some of my own clients and so forth, they're very aware of it in the back of their mind. Does that make sense to everyone? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense to everyone. So you could log into your Facebook ad account today, and you might see a big sign saying your ad account is restricted, or you're not able to advertise. So I want you to be aware, as people who are starting your journey with Facebook ads, is that maybe next year, or as the years progress, next year or whenever, charities in the UK could be affected by a lot of these restrictions. I'm very lucky to co-chair a digital forum here in Dublin, and I have had numerous of charities come up to me and say, Andrew, we're not able to create ads in Facebook anymore because they won't let us. And the challenge has become, how do charities in the EU especially get around these restrictions? So I wanted to paint the picture right from the start that this is what you're heading into. Does that make sense? And but this is, the world of advertising is constantly changing, and so we need to be aware probably of these biggest things, these big restrictions, particularly around if your charity does any sort of political advertising, or comes under this category of social issues, which often includes charities who help people with homeless, health, refugees, that sort of thing, and so forth. And I can send there's lots of resources online around that. So I want to start this session with what I think is working really well with Facebook ads at the moment. And there's a lot you can talk about, but in my experience right from the start, I have found that Facebook lead generation ads have become really popular, both in Ireland and in the UK. And the main reason is because you're now able to own the journey that people go on. You are able to create a donor base or a supporter base of people who support your charity through lead generation ads. So if I was starting off with Facebook ads now, I would be encouraging people to look at the whole area of Facebook lead generation ads, or lead gen ads. So I want to just delve into this a little bit, and for the next few minutes. And I want you then to go away afterwards and go, if for our nonprofit or our charity, would lead generation ads work? Do we have the right budget in place? Do we have the right equipment in place? The technology? Do you, as a nonprofit or charity, want to grow your supporter base? Or are you all about just the donations, etc.? And I've certainly learned the hard way that with leads, that long-term value or the lifetime value of those leads has become more important. So the focus is less on the donation, whether that be £10 or £20, but more focus has become on the lifetime value of those leads. Does that make sense? Converting those leads into donors or supporters of your charity. And this for me is where Facebook ads are working really well. So let me just okay. So my advice from the beginning is, if your Facebook ad account is being affected by any restrictions, whether that be next year or in 10 years' time, or if you log into your ad account now and you see that there are restrictions, I would optimize for higher up the funnel, meaning instead of selecting the conversion objective or the sales objective, select an engagement objective. Diversify your channels. Don't always think of Facebook as the best one. Rethink your creative strategy with Facebook ads. And I can't overestimate this more. The ad copy has become the most important thing within your Facebook ads. And it's the one thing that you have probably the biggest control over. You're going to also, what's become really important is build your first party data. And first party data is data that you own yourself, that you have got permission to own as a nonprofit or charity. And that might be your donor lists or their emails, their first names, that kind of thing, your supporter lists. It could be your purchase history, it could be CRM data, it could be your website activity. That's data that you own yourself. And we live in a world where we become less reliant on a Facebook pixel or a piece of code that you put on your website, and more reliant now than ever on what's called first party data. And I'd also suggest that if your ad account is restricted, to double down on your organic strategy. So how do we continue to grow when Meta is becoming more restrictive? It's increased privacy regulations, less tracking data, AI is becoming an absolute force within Meta ads. And for my solution, as I've mentioned from the beginning, is Facebook lead generation ads. So what are Meta lead generation ads? The example I give you here on my right is one from Pieta House, where they did what's called a cold water challenge, where people had to sign up to do a particular challenge. It was in November, and it performed really well. These are ads that allow users to submit their details directly within Facebook or Instagram. There's no website required, although I wouldn't recommend it. It's faster user experience. They're mobile optimized. It's easier for people to make a decision when they see these type of ads pop up on their mobile. So these are Facebook lead generation ads I'm talking about. The why lead generation ads work very well is because you own the relationship. You own those leads that are coming in through those ads. Your conversions can happen on the platform, on the Meta ad platform, despite the restrictions. And you build those relationships with those leads, with those donors, and it also supports other channels and campaigns. There's no friction. Um, there's no need to leave the Facebook platform. It all happens within the Facebook ecosystem. A lot of the forms that you fill in sometimes come almost pre-filled now as well. And they're mobile first, which I've said already, designed to take quick action. Here's one example from UNICEF Ireland, where UNICEF Ireland were promoting legacies, and this was the option to download a PDF, which was a guide to making a legacy gift to UNICEF Ireland. People saw the ad, you can see it there. You downloaded it by adding your details. You got a message then to say thank you. And then it said you can use the download button below to download our legacy guide. And if you have any questions, you could call or email Pauline directly within the ad. And so within a lot of these lead generation ads, these Facebook lead generation ads, is the option to do various different things. You can have downloads, you can add stories, you can purchase things. There are various options within Facebook lead generation ads that you can use. Just let me go back here. How many people are aware of Facebook lead generation ads? And have you used them in the past? Maybe you could just give me a quick thumbs up. Great. And what has been your experience of them so far? Does anyone want to go? Great. Tom says, I'm aware of them, but never use them. Really good, but depends on having people to reach out. Yeah, I got a little concerned around security. I absolutely agree. Yeah, so there's definitely great, good to see messages come. I'm aware of them, but never used them before. Really good, but depends on having people to reach out to leads. I got a little okay, brilliant. Yeah, I think lead generation, Facebook lead generation ads are brilliant. And going to give you the pros and cons to them now in a minute. All your concerns there are very valid, and they can be used in a variety of different ways. there are definitely concerns around, privacy and ensuring that uh, your own privacy regulations on your website, that's all up to date in terms when you are using them. There's definitely concerns about the quality of lead, and so forth. There's definitely concerns around whether you have the right technology in place to support lead generation ads. And so there are some pros and cons to using Facebook lead generation ads. Yeah, brilliant. God, we're just going to be legacy ad generator, focusing on old age. Brilliant, brilliant, uh, brilliant. That's a great example of the lead generation one. So yeah, if you're doing legacy ads, I find them very useful, like UNICEF Ireland did. So you can download a guide to it and follow up. I will say, just as before I go back to my slides, I will say that Facebook lead generation ads are good, but I will also recommend that if you do have the capacity in house to do it, I would always try and call people as well. If even your if you could, if you could pick your top maybe 10 to 15 leads, for example, I have found that to really get them over the line, I find calling those leads is always a good idea. And if you do have the right technology in place, what I found really works well is lead generation, Facebook lead generation ads, and text. So you can follow up with a text, not just an automated email. Does that make sense to everyone? But let me just quickly go back to these slides, and I will. So this was the UNICEF Ireland example, and as you've seen, they used it to download a legacy guide. However, I want to talk about this challenge. This was an Epilepsy Ireland uh, campaign that I ran with them, and it was a 24-hour squat challenge. It happened from March 24th to the 28th, and essentially what we were asking people to do, 24 squats within 24 hours. Now you could select a goal, you could do more than that. But the difference to this campaign is that I didn't use a Facebook lead generation ad. I directed people to a landing page instead. And I want to just compare the differences with you here now. Because as I said, there are both pros and cons to Facebook lead generation ads. And one of the questions you will ask yourself with lead generation is, should I use lead generation ads, or should I send people to a landing page where people can sign up for a challenge or a campaign? This was some of the ads that ran. It was the ad copy was quite clear in terms of what we were asking people to do. We were encouraging everyone of all fitness levels to do squats, and it performed very well. Epilepsy Ireland is a small to medium-sized charity here in Dublin, and this was their first way of using lead generation ads. They hadn't used these in the past, but this was the first way or type of campaign that they used with lead generation ads. But the main difference here, I hope everyone is understanding, is that they didn't necessarily use Facebook lead generation ads. They directed people to a landing page. So this was the results of it. There was epilepsy. There was 5, and apologies, I'm using euros, so apologies for this. There was 5,000 euros. The number of the leads that they brought in was 157. They brought in a revenue of 42,000. The key metrics in this case was that the cost per lead was 31 euro. The ROAS was very good. and the revenue per lead was roughly about €267 per lead. So I found, and my main point here is to tell you, is that the quality of lead directing people to a landing page was a lot better than setting up a Facebook lead generation ad. So this is the big question. Do you, as a nonprofit, decide to go with meta lead generation ads, or should you send people directly to a landing page on your website? The pros and cons. So with meta lead generation ads, you're balancing high volume versus the quality of leads. The conversions happen on Facebook or Instagram. The cost per lead, it often can be between €3 and €5 or pounds, and there is less friction. On the other hand, when you direct people to a landing page, there's less volume. Conversions happen on a landing page. The cost per lead is often higher, which in the case of Epilepsy Ireland was €31. There was a better quality of lead. That was the big standout for me. You have better ownership of that data and the ability to track that campaign as well. But there are higher friction. So there's both pros and cons to using whether it's Facebook lead generation ads or sending people directly to your website. The other big thing to consider here is your ad spend. I find that meta lead generation ads, it's a lot more cost effective. Thus, your ad spend in total can sometimes be on the smaller side. Whereas if you're sending people directly to a landing page, your ad spend would often be that bit higher, mainly because the cost per lead is higher. In general, and this is what I think is really important, right? What makes lead generation work? In general, I'm talking about here now. You need a strong foundation, the right technology in place, automated emails, or even SMS or texts, a CRM system, MailChimp or Dot Digital, and committed to nurturing those leads, not just acquiring those leads. So for me, what is really important is the ads are one thing, but having the appropriate technology and those automations in place. But what else can you do with lead generation ads? And in the past, I've set up hand raisers. That could be a simple email sign up, a digital download to a free guide or report. It could be a value exchange. It could be a legacy has worked well. Or, as I alluded to already with Epilepsy Ireland, you could do social fundraising, which in my case was a fitness challenge. The main takeaways from this section is meta restrictions are not going away. So although many charities in the UK aren't affected by them yet, they could well still happen. Lead generation can build warm, high-intent audiences. In particular, I have found when we direct people to a landing page. Success, though, requires a proper foundation and patience. So a foundation being the appropriate technology in place and ultimately help you drive long-term value or lifetime value. What would you do next? Test lead generation with your existing campaigns. Focus on what your audience would exchange for their email for. Build a simple automated welcome email journey and maybe even WhatsApp. So MailChimp does a very good example of a simple automated welcome email journey and having that set up and integrated with your website. And you measure success beyond immediate conversions, more that lifetime value of people who support your charity and how often they donate. Okay. So if you won't for a second, maybe just turn off your mics for a second. Just I'd love to get people's again. So let me ask a question here. If you're familiar with Facebook lead generation ads now, would you prefer to use those, or would you direct people to a landing page, do you think?
I'd probably do a mix of both.
Both, brilliant.
Um, so we did lead generation and also put some budget towards brand awareness as well. So we did have some
Okay,
leads that came through a form on our website as well. So it did
okay, okay.
work really well.
Oh,
We've only just finished our campaign, so we've not got the final results, but
results.
it was really successful so far.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. And tell me, do you have do you so you use Facebook lead generation ads, or do you direct them to a landing page?
We did both.
You did both, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
So well, it was we did brand awareness,
as well.
directing them to our landing page where they had the
Okay,
option to download the same guide, but it was hidden behind a form on the
okay,
website. So
okay.
we were still capturing their details. Um, we also
Yeah.
did stuff on Google as well,
Oh,
but
brilliant. Okay.
that's separate.
That's, it'll be very interesting to test how your lead generation ads did to those to come directly to your landing page.
They were much more
Fresh-
successful than the brand awareness, but
Okay,
it was teasing both to the
teasing
audiences
both.
so that
Okay,
they
okay,
could kind of because we had a film,
okay,
so we had the film shown to them as well.
okay, okay. All right. Okay, very interesting. And then, so obviously, then you have the kind of the appropriate technology in place. Do you have an automated email journey that went out as well, or
Yeah, so
did
they
you use?
received 4 emails over the space of about 6 weeks.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah, so a welcome email
Okay,
reminding them about the guide, a couple of case studies, and just a bit more about the charity. And because it
okay,
was over Free Will Month, there was
okay.
information
Yeah,
about Free Will's Month in there as well.
brilliant, 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 brilliant. Very good. And did you call them at all, or did you?
No, we didn't take we just took their name and email
Okay,
address. We
okay,
didn't capture telephone numbers.
okay, okay. Okay, excellent. And sorry, apologies for by the questions. Um, did you use your own website, or did you use a fundraising platform for it?
No, it was just a page on our own website.
Okay,
Because it was for legacies, so
okay,
it was just
okay.
specifically on our own website.
Just to add, and this is a point for everyone, I have found in recent years that many of the charities I work with are using what's called fundraising platforms. So you might be familiar with them in that you've got Fundraise Up. Did these ring a bell with anyone? Or Fundraising? Um, you've got Enthuse. Um, I would say on a smaller scale, you've got Enthuse, and here in Dublin, you'd have I Donate is another example. But on a bigger scale, I have found if you were to really invest in Facebook lead generation ads, and you found that your website was not up to scratch, and I think this is where the option. So for that Epilepsy Ireland campaign, we used a fundraising platform called Fundraise Up, um, and their platforms are designed to capture leads in a very seamless way. That's the best way I can do it. And I found with some of the work that I do in the digital form, we often have conversations around fundraising platforms, and there are lots out there. Um, as I said, there are those kind of similar to Enthuse, but there are those that are much bigger, like Fundraise Up or Fundraising. I know that sounds. Does everyone get those two? Fundraise Up and Fundraising. Um, and I would recommend it, and the reason why that is because most charity websites, and this is no reflection on you guys, but most charity websites are often either designed to look good but aren't designed in a way for people to take action. Does that make sense to people? So I could go to your website and I could click on a button, but there's no automated email behind that or a welcome journey on it. Or perhaps it's not designed in a way that that I can clearly make a donation or sign up to your newsletter or sign up to your event. So these call to actions are really important. And so what I found, as I said, is that a lot of charities are moving to a fundraising platform to use alongside their website. And these fundraising platforms then can be integrated with your CRM or your email system. And indeed, a lot of these fundraising platforms like Fundraise Up have an automated email system already built in them. And it gives you reporting, and it does everything. It does lots of things, okay? Now, there is a cost to all this, but so you gotta weigh that up. And so if your charity or nonprofit were saying, "Oh, Andrew, we really would like to invest in lead generation, but your website is not up to scratch." Does everyone mean by that? You might look at using a fundraising platform, and there's lots of out there. And indeed, happy later on if you have any questions, or I can make recommendations about them as well. Those lead generators. So as I said, that Epilepsy Ireland campaign, that 24-hour squat challenge that we won, that was a social fundraising campaign that directed people to a Fundraising Up platform where people registered very quickly, and they within seconds received an automated email and then several emails after that. And I will say, just from a campaign performance, the sooner you send emails, the better. So I'm very much about the welcome email, but then within 24 hours later, I'd be sending a second email very quickly. Does that make sense to everyone? Any further questions do people have on what we're talking about? Any thoughts?
Could I just ask about
Yeah.
so when you're saying, Andrew, about like websites not being up to scratch in
Yes.
comparison to something like Fundraise Up or Fundraising, are you talking about the sort of the donor journey there or something like that? So sort of like the
Yes. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I'm talking about that donor journey. I'm talking about the form on your website that you're asking people to fill in. That can sometimes be clunky or difficult to do or not make sense. So this is where you would have to have a hard look at your landing page and really optimize it and design it in a way that when people come on it, that they can very easily sign up for whatever you're giving away. Um, um, but I want to reiterate that slide, that I have found that although Facebook lead generation ads might have a cheaper cost per lead of maybe £3 to £5 or whatever, using a landing page, I've found you get less leads, but the quality of leads are often that bit better. Does that make sense? But the all important part of it is that journey you bring people on afterwards. So it's the emails that happen soon after someone takes an action. And the other thing to bear in mind is ad spend. What questions, and I'm going to come to this in a minute, but when it comes to ad spend, are you the type of nonprofit that leads towards starting with a low ad spend, or do you try to kind of have a higher ad spend? How do you manage the ad spend side of things when it comes to Facebook ads? Does anyone give that a go?
What would you say counts as a lower spend or a higher spend?
Yeah, I would generally, Susan, I generally say I use the words realistic ad spend. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to eat into my slides too quickly, but I would stay away from a low ad spend. So I typically recommend that charities or nonprofits spend at least, in my world, would be €3,000. So that's about, I think, 2,600 pounds roughly, I think. Um, but you need a realistic ad spend, especially if you already understand what the cost per lead is already. Does that make sense? So if the yeah, so if you're, so when you do the maths very quickly, sorry, my brain's not doing maths at the moment in my head, but when you do the maths, you need a realistic ad spend to cover the cost per lead, to ensure that the quality of leads comes in. Now, there are other things I'm going to go into as well. But I think often with a campaign with meta ads, yes, with a Facebook lead generation campaign, the cost per lead can between 3 and 5, in my case, euros, which is very low. Or if you're directing people to a landing page, like I did with the Epilepsy Ireland campaign, the cost per lead there in that case was €30. Does that make sense to everyone? So it's a higher cost per lead or cost per acquisition when you send people directly to a landing page, but a lower cost per lead when you use the Facebook lead generation ads. Does that make sense to everyone? And as I mentioned, the quality of leads I found were better when I directed people to a landing page, but I did have all my technology in place, my automated emails. They received a text. We even called people. So it's really, that's a question you need to decide what you want to do yourself. And, often comes down to the kind of ad spend you're going to take. Does that make sense? If someone says, Andrew, I only want to spend £500, I'd probably say no. If someone said, Andrew, I want to spend £1,000, I'd probably say no. That's still on the too small things. So you need a realistic, and I always recommend, if I'm running an advertising campaign over the course of 1 month, I'd need an ad spend of at least £3,000 or €3,000. Does that make sense to everyone? Go ahead,
So
Susan.
I can ask, is that still the same if you're just like a local charity looking to have local reach, or is that the rule for both local and national charities?
Yeah, that's for everyone. One of the big change, or one of the obvious things, is that meta ads are not cheap, and that's just the reality of it nowadays. So that's for everyone, Susan. That's both for a local charity, or a national charity. And I think if you're a local charity, though, you have to decide whether meta ads. I'd go back a step, Susan. I'd suggest, well, is meta ads even a good fit for you at the beginning? Does that make sense?
I would say not if we need to spend
Yes.
£1,000 because that's significantly more than our current entire marketing budget. So, yeah.
Absolutely. No, I get it. So in your case, you would be, probably maybe using the Google ad grant, where you can target quite specific areas, or a paid Google ad account where you can target specific areas around your area. But Facebook, the reason why we're talking about Facebook is it is still probably the better channel or better social media site out there for lead generation and donations. It is still very good, but it is expensive. And you have to consider what is your cost per lead and how many leads you want to generate in order to have a good idea of what kind of ad spend you want. Does that make sense for everyone? And so when people say, oh, we're going to do a low ad spend, I usually say, no, let's have more of a realistic ad spend when it comes to Facebook ads. Unfortunately, it is. I still think it's cheaper than traditional fundraising when it comes to acquisition. You know, if someone knocks on your door, you have to hire them. You know, that's a lot more. But yeah, my point is Facebook lead ads are expensive. So my recommendation, if you're new to ads, I'd run the campaign over the course of 1 month, and I would need at least £2,600 to properly get a good insight into how that campaign performed. And I'll tell you why in my next slide. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Any other questions? Great. Okay, let me just. Okay, so those of you who are very new to Facebook ads, I wanted to just cover a few things. When you log into your Facebook ad account, obviously you need to set one up first. But when you log into an ad account, you have to select the objective. And I would go as far as recommending the following objectives that you should choose, because I found some objectives to be not as effective or even a waste of time. So I would select the engagement objective. So if you're first time doing Facebook ads, select the engagement objective, especially if your ad spend is on the low side, because you're only paying for cost per click. Engagement, leads, or sales. They're the three best objectives to select. Obviously, engagement objective is middle of the funnel. Leads is again higher up in the funnel, or sorry, engagement objective is mid funnel, but then as you go down, leads and sales being donations, these are lower down the funnel. And obviously, as you go lower down the funnel, the leads and sales are that cost per lead or cost per sale or cost per acquisition is more expensive. But if you're starting off with new ads and you've never advertised before on Facebook and you have £1,000 to spend, I would select the engagement. Awareness and traffic ads are, for the most part, a waste of time. And I say that. I have no problem saying that. I just think engagement ads work a lot better. The next thing to consider here is, and we could talk a lot about this, so I'm going to try not to, but simple ad structure. I remember years ago when you created an ad campaign, you had your campaign, your ad set, your ad, and you would have multiple campaigns, multiple ad sets, and multiple ads. And I would often log into an ad account and see these. There could be up to 50 campaigns in some cases I've seen in some ad accounts. But my point here is this. Avoid overcomplicating your campaigns. The best practice I have found, and indeed I hear a lot of people talking about, is to have one campaign, 1 to 2 ad sets, and 2 to 3 ads. Avoid too many different audiences or constant changes. So when it comes to targeting the right audience, generally speaking, what is recommended now is a broad audience. And believe it or not, that the AI or the algorithm is better suited at targeting the right people for you than you are sometimes. And so when you're starting off, and to give your campaign a chance to breathe, and for the algorithm to work, and for the AI to work, and for your campaign for Meta to target the right people, you need to have a broader audience. Now, it can still be targeted, but once it's on the broad side of things. And the second thing I would say is to avoid constant changes. If you publish an ad campaign, you need to give it up to at least 6 to 7 days for that campaign to be better optimized and to learn. So if you are starting off with your Facebook ads, I would suggest one campaign, one ad set, and maybe 2 to 3 ads, and test which of those ads perform best. Don't have too many audiences. I'd suggest have a broad audience and avoid making constant changes. Start with a clear goal. So if you wanted 200 leads, for example, and you knew the cost per lead was €5 in my case, you would need a total budget of €1,000. And that's why it's really important to understand what is your cost per lead. So I can go back to certain clients and say, a previous campaigns we ran, the cost per lead was €30 or €5. And we can work backwards to say that, well, Andrew, we want so many leads, and this was the cost per lead. And this gives us a rough idea of the kind of budget that we need to work with. It's important when you publish an ad campaign, the following is really important to know. That Facebook, there's what's called the Facebook learning phase, which it makes things very pernickety sometimes, but what happens when you publish a campaign, it goes into the learning phase, and it's discovering who best to target your ads to. The performance of your campaign during those 6 to 7 days, the learning phase, is often unstable, and your cost per lead or your cost per acquisition can sometimes go up or fluctuate, and can be sometimes even higher than you expected. And typically, and this is not a fast and a hard rule at all, but it typically lasts until the Facebook learning phase typically lasts until you generate around 30 to 50 conversions. And that Facebook tells us that needs to happen within 7 days. Now, that's, as I said, not a hard and fast rule, but I often see a campaign that is struggling to get out of the learning phase because it's not reaching enough conversions. And so these are some of the issues that can sometimes come into play. So just be aware that if you are publishing a campaign, there is the learning phase, and the learning phase lasts between 6 to 7 days. And the learning phase is when Facebook and the algorithm is learning who best to target your ads to. Your budget or your cost per lead will fluctuate, and that is something you need to be aware of when you're deciding your ad spend at the beginning. And as I said, you typically need about 30 to 50 conversions to get out of that learning phase in order for your campaign then to begin to grow and get better. But as I said, it's not a hard and fast rule either. As avoid during those learning phases, I'd avoid making big edits during the learning phase. Let the algorithm do the work as much possible, and only make changes when there is, sorry about the error there, when there is significant data. So you're only really going to make adjustments to your campaign when you see the number of leads or the number of donations, whatever it might be, actually appearing within your ad account. If you make changes too early, your ad account, your campaign will not grow as quickly as you'd like, and your ads often stay in that learning phase. Why does low ad? So here's a question. I get asked a lot about low ad spend. Why does low ad spend make it difficult to do a meaningful test, optimize, or learn from your campaigns? The reason for I'm against low ad spend is because what's called limited data. Your algorithm cannot collect enough data in order for it to grow. The learning phase takes longer to complete. Testing different ads will mean each ad does not get enough exposure. So if you have a low ad spend and you're testing too many different ads, then your ads aren't going to get enough exposure. And that's my point, back to the point that when you are creating your first campaign, keep this campaign structure. Don't overcomplicate it. Have one campaign, one ad set, and 3 to 5 ads when you're starting off. It's as the algorithm is working, it's optimizing for signals. There's often a higher cost per result. And it undermines your chance to have a successful campaign. So with a low ad spend, it's difficult to make a meaningful test. It's difficult to see how well your campaign will perform. You'll have limited data in that Facebook that can work with. The learning phase will take longer. If you're testing different ads, it will mean each ad does not get enough exposure, does not get seen. You won't be able to optimize for what's called signals. You'll have a higher cost per result or lead with a low ad spend, and it undermines your chances of your campaign performing well. Now, I just want to stop that and just address that 1 second. So what am I saying here? Hopefully everyone understands what I'm saying here, okay? Because I've heard it a lot. When we're looking at Facebook ads and we're starting our first campaign, a low ad spend is not recommended. That's ultimately what I'm saying here. And the reasons for that, your algorithm, the algorithm or the data that Facebook collects won't be enough. You won't have significant data in order to do a good test or campaign. Your learning phase, which I've talked about already, you'll be longer in that learning phase. Does that make sense? And the longer you're in that learning phase, the result, the cost per lead or the cost per acquisition will be a lot more. Facebook nowadays works on what's called signals. I know this is getting too nerdy about ads here for a moment, so apologies. But it needs a certain amount of signals or data for them to work. And the less signals it has, the less your campaign will perform. And if you have 3 to 5 ads, or maybe you have 10 ads, if you have a low ad spend, from a very practical point of view, your ads aren't going to get seen as much as you'd like. So that's what I'm saying is that if you are deciding on what kind of ad spend you're going to do, it needs to be a lot more realistic as opposed to being on the low side. And I have found that in euros anyway, it's 3,000 euros being sort of a baseline for it, especially if I want to run a campaign over the course of a month. And I would recommend that a month, in my mind, is a good time to run a meta ad campaign. It gives you a good insight into how well that campaign performed. it gives a chance for the ads and the algorithm to work. It gives a chance for the whole Facebook ecosystem to do its work and target the right people. So if you choose a smaller timeline, whether it be that 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you're not giving your ad campaign enough time. Does that make sense? Facebook ads, I think, are a bit like I've ever been on a cruise. Sorry, this is way off. But if you've ever been on a cruise, it's slow and steady. And Facebook ads are often slow and steady. You need to give that campaign adequate time for it to perform well. And hopefully that makes sense to people. So low ad spend, I would stay away from, because in most cases, and I say this respectfully, it often can be a waste of time. And don't take that the hard way, but if someone said, Andrew, we only want to spend £500 or £1,000, I'd probably say, no, that's not enough. You need that, or realistically, you need about that £2,600 in order to, or £2,000 in order to get the good insights into how your campaign performed well. The other points that I mentioned in that slide was about the objective. If you're choosing a Facebook objective, you've got 4, 5 or 6 there you can choose from. My recommendation is that you choose engagement objective, the lead generation, or the sales objective. Does that make sense to everyone? So there's nothing wrong with running engagement ads. So Susan, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. If Susan has a small budget and she wants to test Facebook ads, I'd select the engagement objective, because the cost per click in that case is a lot smaller. And if I was looking at it from a strategic point of view, say Susan had £1,000 to spend and you wanted to get the most out of those ads, I would probably choose the engagement objective and run it over a long period of time. So that might be a month, maybe even more, depending on how popular your nonprofit or charity is. So a good way to test it is to use engagement objective. And those for who may have a good ad spend or a bit more, but want to advertise over a longer period of time, say 6 months, engagement objective is very good. And the call to action on those ads would be to learn more. And again, if you're new to Facebook ads, it's a good way to grow your brand out there, to get people more familiar with your nonprofit or charity, and a good way for you to learn how to work Facebook ads and how to deal with them. So engagement objective, the lead generation one, which is where I'm really recommending people test. And then if you wanted donations and you said, well, Andrew, we want donations for a Christmas campaign, you'd select the sales objective. But be very aware that the cost per acquisition in that case could be as much as £40-50, especially when you're publishing your campaign at the beginning, and because of that learning phase. So be aware that that sales objective or that donation objective is lower down the funnel for a reason and will cost you more. Does that make sense? So if Susan says, Andrew, I want to bring in donations, but I only have £1,000 to spend, I'd probably say, no, Susan, come back to me when you've got £5,000 to spend, and maybe we'll do it at Christmas time where people are more likely to give, and you would work on it that way. The other thing I want to because I don't have a slide for it, but the other thing I want to just make very clear for everyone, and I've got a few messages coming in. That's okay. Domestic emergencies. Rashenda, yeah, is that 3 to 5 ads per ad set? Yes. Does that make Rashenda? Does that make sense to you? I would limit of 3 to 5 ads per ad set. More ads means your ads are going to go through the learning phase and can often take longer. I want to just, before I go to the comments, I want to just also make that point. So I've talked about objectives. We talked about the learning phase that your ads go into. We've talked briefly about the cost of having a realistic ad spend. The other fourth thing, which is really important now more than anything, is the ad creative. So the one thing you have as an advertiser more control over nowadays, although that is probably going to change with AI. If you've recently logged into your ad account, you'll see AI now recommends different images and texts for you. And I find myself turning off a lot of the AI recommendations because, well, especially if I'm beginning or starting off, I like to have control over what message goes out there or what image goes out there. You can even add music now to your ads very quickly. And I saw this ad that went out on Facebook and it had a tune to it, but the tune or the song had nothing to do with the ad copy. So these are some of the errors that can happen. But my point here is this: the ad creative is really, really important. So when you're creating your 3 to 5 ads, have a good mixture of ad copy, whether that be an image, a video, a carousel ad. You could have maybe your nonprofit or charity have an influencer that you could use, and this is or content creator, people you could film very quickly and publish their ads. So my point is here, have a variation of different ads, okay? Don't have all images. Does that make sense to everyone? Have a variation of ads, maybe 3 to 5 or more, 3 to 5 ads, especially if you're beginning off with variations of ad copy, testing different types of ad types. So if your ad copy, for example, has one ad has a blue background, make sure the second ad has a red background. Does that make sense? So you're testing very different variations of your messaging. Does that make sense? So often you'd have a core story or message that you'd use as part of your campaign. Take variations of that messaging or that story and use them within the ads. And then test the type of ad, whether that be image, video, carousel, dynamic ads. There's a host of different types of ads. And what you want to do within those 3 to 5 ads is kind of test the type of ad that's going to work best for you. Does that make sense to everyone? And the ad creative is so important. And think about when you're doing the ad creative that think of your audience and who you're trying to target. And if you're a small charity and you're trying to target people in your local area, you need to have a thought of, well, if I want to target people in my city, think about the ad creative and how the ad creative can reflect your city or the town or wherever you are, and that messaging being about where you are. So I live in Dublin, so it might be a case of I just want to target people in Dublin, so the imagery would reflect places in Dublin. The text would reflect up. Does that make sense to people? And so let me reiterate. Campaign objective, really important. Don't overcomplicate your ad structure. Does that make sense to everyone? So if I was to look at your ad account, Susan, again, I'm picking on you, and Susan had 5 campaigns with 10 ad sets, with 10 ads in each ad set, and she only had €1,000 pounds to spend, I'd probably saying this: you've too many ads. We need to cut it right back and start with a very simple ad structure. One campaign, maybe 1 to 2 ad sets, and maybe 3 to 5 ads per ad set. And you can then, it gives your campaign a chance to learn, gives a chance for the algorithm to work, because the more ads you have, the harder the Facebook ecosystem has to work. Does that make sense for everyone? And you'll find then your budget gets quickly eaten into very quickly. Okay, let me just bring the slides to an end here. So low ad spend, try to stay away from it. The other thing I would just say, okay, that don't get bogged down in what's called vanity metrics, followers on social media, impressions, and more. So when you're doing paid advertising on Meta, focus on the following KPIs: your return on investment, your opt-ins. So your opt-ins being, if you direct people to a landing page to make a donation, you'd often have an opt-in for that person to sign up to your newsletter. Hopefully that makes sense, but focus on not just how many donations you make or how many leads you bring in, but focus on the second goal, which might be those who sign up for your newsletter. Use lead generation ads to focus on the lifetime value, not just the immediate conversion. Look at your cost per lead, constantly looking at that to gauge your adequate ad spend or your cost per acquisition, and then total income and profit. These are the KPIs that fundraising managers, board members are more interested in, as opposed to my ad got so many clicks, etc. Hopefully that makes sense to speak. But if you are advertising and you are going to invest £1,000 or £3,000 or £2,000, you need to report back in terms of these kind of KPIs and nothing else really. Some tips and recommendations before I bring things to an end. Only scale Facebook ads when you are delivering a few results. So what do I mean by that? I'm saying only make changes to your ads when you are seeing results happen. Okay, don't be quick to make when you publish in a campaign. The tendency is to say, well, Andrew, the cost per acquisition is going up, it's too high, it's eating into our ad spend, or things are taken too long. The tendency is to go in and start editing the campaign. My recommendation is you don't do that. Only scale up or make changes to the Facebook ads when you are delivering results, and those few results. Beware also how competitive it is at Christmas time. I know it's a bit odd, but it's one to be very aware of. At the beginning and during the duration of each campaign, always be testing new ad copy. And I would go as far as refreshing those ads every 2 weeks to see which ads are going to work best for you. Don't overcomplicate your ad campaign structure. Remember, keep it one campaign with 1 or 2 ad sets and 3 to 5 ads per ad set. Choose the right objective. So, as I said, choose the right objective, which has to be engagement, leads, or sales. But particularly if you're on the ad spend is on the lower side of things, choose the engagement objective. Don't turn off your ads too early, and be aware of what's called ad fatigue. Ads, as I already alluded to, need to be changed and refreshed every 2 weeks, because what happens is your ads get seen, and often they get overseen, and then fatigue kicks in, and your ads become less effective. So consider that when it comes to that 2 week mark, you need to have already planned your next ads to publish. And you're ultimately trying to see which ads are actually performing best. Just some resources to help you along your way. For those of you who want to look at your competitors to see what they're doing, you can go to facebook.com ads library. And then if you do want support, and I'm very aware that Facebook support is awful, you go to facebook.com/GPA, and that is for nonprofits and charities. So if, for example, your ad account or your Facebook page, you can't log in or you've lost access, that's where you'd go to try and get support. Okay. Okay. I finished a little bit earlier in my thoughts. So do you have any questions anyone have on what I've mentioned? Or now, if you have a particular scenario within your own nonprofit and you want some advice, now would be a good time to ask any questions. But just let me elaborate a little bit on those KPIs. For those of you who are responsible for ad spend, and if you are going to run those ads, I can guarantee the fundraising manager does not want to know how many clicks your ads got, because they'll just look at you and turn you away. They will want to know what was the return on investment, what was your cost per lead. They'll want to know what the ROAS was and those sort of things. So it's important that you're aware that when you report on ads, and it is getting a lot more difficult reporting, but it's slightly easier with lead generation ads. That's the one thing I like about lead generation ads. You can say, we got so many leads. You can get a good average as to what the cost per lead was, and this was the amount of revenue brought in. Does that make sense? But if you're directing people to a landing page and asking them to make a donation, it can be difficult sometimes to understand what the return on investment was. Because unfortunately nowadays, people don't just click on an ad and then go and make a donation. They click on an ad and then go to Google and then they go onto their TikTok account and then they follow another. So the journey is not straightforward anymore. It's often a lot more complicated. So understand what the important KPIs that you need to report back on, and those tips hopefully made sense in terms of if you're starting your Facebook ads, hopefully they made sense, hopefully they made sense. So what questions, just out of curiosity, because I realize I do a lot of talking, that you might have? Great, there's a few. Susan, thank you very much. Sorry for picking on you, Susan. Thank you very much. Always need someone to talk about. A few people have left already. That's okay. Any other questions?
I've got
Yeah.
I've got a bit of it's probably quite a simple question, I guess. But so in terms of having this mix of creative when we're running ads, so
Yeah.
Just to clarify, we're talking about running all of those simultaneously. So having like a video running at the same time as having an ad that's like a carousel, and maybe two ads that are both still images but have different types of copy on them. That's the idea,
Yes.
is it would run them
Yeah,
simultaneously. Yeah.
absolutely. So run them simultaneously. Have, say, for example, Tom, have your say we take 6 ads,
Yep.
run them, publish them together, but run different variations, but very distinct variations. Don't, and if it has a blue background one, the other one has to have a red. It has to be quite distinct in terms of what you're testing. So you can say, well, that ad with the blue background worked better with the ad with the red background. And then that's the actual creative side. And then use variations in terms of a video ad, you can have someone speaking to camera. You can have obviously an image ad. You can have a carousel. You got now what's called dynamic ad creative is another one to test, which allows you to create one ad, but upload various types of images or videos. And Facebook runs that ad, but it selects the best type of image or video to show people. But dynamic ad creative is a good example. If you are starting off again with ads, is a good one to select. Does that make sense, Tom, or does that? What's your situation, Tom? Do you have any further? Are you big ad spenders, or are you?
No, certainly not. But not in the way you're talking about. But it's really interesting to hear. Here it talks about and using it this way. We don't really spend that much on ads at all, but it's coming up to the 40th anniversary of our charity next year, so I can certainly see, and there's a plan to do a big push in fundraising based around that. So I could certainly see there being the window to do a larger budget scale advertising. So yeah, it's really helpful to think about it in that way.
Are you a local charity or a more medium-sized charity, or?
Yeah, local, I would say. Yeah,
local
based.
Charity. Okay.
Yeah, certainly like the service that our charity provides is local. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Sorry to pick on you there, Tom. Very good.
No.
All right. Any other questions? I know some people are leaving messages. I think it was it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Good. Is Camille still with us? Are you there?
I am.
Oh, good. You had a great question. What kind of fees would you expect a digital agency to charge to manage your campaigns? I can recommend some agencies that I think are fair. You need to decide whether you want a freelancer or an agency. That would be my second thought. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But I do know digital agencies can be very expensive. So I would say my recommendation is to go with a freelancer. I've worked with agencies and they could cost maybe $4,000 a month pounds, just on agency fees. So you need to include your agency fees on top of your ad spend, and things can get very expensive. So in your case, obviously I don't know your case specifically, but I'd probably go with a freelancer if you are, and they work better with you to try and understand the situation, as opposed to an agency being a lot more expensive. So there's pros and cons to both. Does that answer your question, Camille?
Not really.
No, not really. Okay.
Well, it kind of doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, we do some in-house and we use an agency. It was more just what you felt. We do have a digital agency because typically when we up our spend on Meta, it's part of a multi-channel campaign, and it will be booking our TV and our outdoor, etc., all at the same time because we're a national charity. I guess my question was how much of your ad spend was reasonable, like at 20%, or is it fixed fee? Because I know you come from an agency background, so I mean we've got a really good relationship with them, and I like them having an agency because it makes them accountable when it comes to revenue generation campaigns. But yeah, I think it's just what you felt was sensible. You know, say you're doing a 10k spend on Meta, what you felt was reasonable, just to see whether we're being ripped off or not. Essentially.
Yeah. So if you're doing a 10k on ad spend, you want to know what percentage, just
from your experience, what would that
Yeah.
be? Would it be 20%? Would it be, you know, I'm just curious as to what you think is reasonable for agencies to charge. I mean, you might not have the answer to that. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, it is going to be different. I'm not going to give a specific percentage. It's hard to know, but I do know they vary. I think this is one thing I've come across, is that agencies will vary. So you've got big agencies like a VAS that can cost maybe 30-40% of that. And then I've agencies who've seen maybe less, maybe down to 10-5% of it. So I think you're lucky in that you have a good agency and you've a good relationship with them. And I think that's the best. That's going to be my best answer for the moment. Apologies.
That's fine.
Tori, is A/B testing still beneficial to use? Yes and no. It depends on. So there's the A/B testing tool within Face. Is that what you're referring to, Tori?
Yeah, it was just when you were discussing kind of like, you know, if you're already putting the ad spend in and then deciding whether you want it to be the graphic or the carousel, kind of using that maybe as a pre-step to determine what's better at a lower cost rather than using it in the cost phase on top of. Like, could you try and take that step out of, if you know what I mean? Just like, if that makes sense.
There's a new testing tool within Facebook. Have you got a Facebook ad account? Yeah, so there's a new there is a mine anyway, a new testing. So I always found the A/B testing tool within Facebook ad account to be clunky and difficult to do. I found if I have a low ad spend, that I'm sometimes better off just running, say, 4 ads, for example, and testing which ones work best. Does that make sense? But there is, and it's just gone from my mind now, there's a new tool within Facebook that allows you to run a campaign while at the same time, within that same campaign, test various ads. It's one of the new features. So back to your question, is A/B testing testing is still very beneficial, but whether you use the traditional A/B testing tool, fine, or if you, like I said, if you have a low ad spend, sometimes you're just as good as to test 4 ads and see which ones work best, and just put a limit in terms of the ad spend and say, I'm just going to test, I'm going to spend £100, run it for 3 weeks or whatever, and see which works best. So yes, testing ads is still really important, and I would try and refresh the ad copy every 2 weeks. I have found that could be different in your case, but every 2 to 3 weeks, try and retest the ads, republish new ads, to refresh that ad copy while ultimately test. So you could do, sorry, I'm going into too much detail here, but you could, Tori, you could have, say, you could have 2 campaigns, one campaign mainly for testing and one campaign where you've got your ads in it that are working well. Does that make sense? So you would move your ads from the campaign that's going well and move them into, move the ads that are performing well within the testing campaign. You move the ones that are performing well and put them into the campaign that you're using to really scale up your advertising. Does that make sense? So you could have 2 campaigns, one for testing and one for what I would describe for scaling, really putting more budget behind. But yes, definitely test. And kind of to Tom's point, test variations of those ads, but very clear, distinctive variations, even within that A/B testing tool. Does that help, or am I waffled?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of like a smaller charity as well. We're like kind of the main of our ads, which are on the lower kind of cost side of it. are more so for raising awareness of the organisations, like what
Okay.
we do, rather than it be, say, for a fundraising goal at the
Okay.
moment. So let's say what have we got in Highlands that we're trying to, like, what's that, 2/4 of a
Yes.
million, like, kind of population, and I'm going out to try and, like, get reach is what I'm looking for at the moment.
Yes.
And I'll be lucky if I'm hitting maybe 70,000 to 100,000 in a paid ad that
Yes.
I'm running. Would you still say that they're not beneficial low-cost ads to be running?
Yeah, I think you'd be using the engagement objective.
Yeah.
I would kind of stay away from sales or donation ads.
Yeah.
They're going to cost you too much. You could try lead generation, but for the moment, I think that they're beneficial for you to grow your brand and create awareness around what you do. And if you have a certain amount of ad spend and you say, Andrew, how best can I use this £5,000 over the year, or £1,000? You could have an always-on advertising campaign using the engagement objective and have that on in the background over the course of the year or 6 months. That's not going to cost you a fortune. And you could set the budget to say, I only wanted to spend £1,000. And
that was going to be my next question. Yeah.
yeah. So don't you would come into the whole thing of what's called lifetime budget or a daily budget. So I would suggest in your case use lifetime budget, because that's hard rules in terms of you don't want Facebook to spend more than the lifetime budget. Okay, guys, I'll wrap it up, and apologies, my internet went there. But feel free to, hopefully that all made sense, and feel free to if you have any questions, I'm sure Holly will happily take your emails.